I've written before about the overwhelming weight of expectation placed on established developers like Team Ninja. When the public comes to anticipate the next release on the strength of your recent few, it's never going to go down well when you deviate from a perceived formula. Take Wolong Fallen Dynasty, for example, a game released last year that could have been titled Neo 3 without causing too much of a stir. 3 games in a row with punishing Souls-like combat and streamlined, contained mission areas, and no amount of counter-marketing will prevent people from coming to Rise of the Ronin and complaining that Team Ninja have done something differently. Because Rise of the Ronin is very different to Neo or Wolong, despite similarities in the aesthetics and the UI. It's an open-world action RPG more akin to Ghost of Tsushima and of roughly the same difficulty level, designed to be explored at your own pace. It's also got more story than we're used to from Team Ninja, delving into the politically charged closing years of the Japanese Edo period, when what would eventually become Tokyo was struggling to maintain its cultural identity while also attempting to create trade opportunities and increase wealth by ingratiating itself with Western powers. The quiet invasion of Japan could have, in a more subtle game, been a powerful narrative device, and while Rise of the Ronin treats it with a certain respect, it dampens that respect with silly fantastical elements and deviations from historical accuracy for the sake of spectacle. But if I'm honest, I don't mind that it does. It allows a certain amount of mysticism to bleed into the world and allows the combat to be over the top and flashy, even while avoiding the inclusion of Oni or yokai. There are no monsters in Rise of the Ronin, and yet it still manages to be exciting and surreal thanks to Assassin's Creed levels of artistic license. There are famous faces here such as Matthew C. Perry, no, not Chandler from Friends, and Ryoma Sakamoto. And just like in a Ubisoft game, they're here to give advice, oppose or befriend your created character. Accuracy be damned. There's something reminiscent of the Old West about the setting, when disenfranchised samurai roam the land, still clinging to the old codes of honour and justice that the advance of capitalism was doing its best to outlaw. You are one such wandering samurai, formerly one half of a duo of warriors trained by the Veiled Edge. You create both in the character creator and must choose which to continue with after a certain point in the story. Oddly, what would have worked well framed as a kind of revenge odyssey in a 25-hour linear adventure loses some of its impact when stretched across a huge open world, as you periodically shelve thoughts of personal honour to bum about finding missing cats and solving other people's disputes. Yet Rise of the Ronin presents a perfectly serviceable, compelling open world. Story quests often require you to choose between pro and anti-shogunate groups, given the impression that what you're doing could alter the political destiny of an entire nation. As a result, I often felt the pull of the story even as I was doing all the aforementioned bumming about. Players coming into this expecting combat mechanics on the same level as Neo 2 or Wolong Fallen Dynasty may be disappointed though, and this was the point I made in the opening. Rise of the Ronin isn't really a Souls-like at all. It borrows elements from the genre quite blatantly at times, with things like the Veiled Edge banners allowing you to save your progress and respawn there when you die, but it's much more forgiving than Team Ninja's previous games. There are difficulty settings and the final choice might serve to bring the combat closer to that level, but besides a handful of story bosses, nothing gave me much trouble, and those only did because they're so relentlessly fast and tricky to parry. Much of Ronin's combat relies on timing and stamina management, here using the ki system once more. Dealing danger or parrying attacks depletes the enemy's ki, eventually rendering them staggered and ready for a vicious attack that does massive damage or can even kill them outright. There are fewer combos and skills than you might expect, but every weapon has multiple stances and each stance has its own special moves to afford versatility. It's incredibly satisfying to land a perfect parry and slice your foe to pieces as a retort. With ranged weapons like bows and guns, shurikens, bombs and a goddamn flamethrower, there's enough diversity here to forge builds from the 4 main stats of charm, dexterity, intelligence and strength. Armour and weapons come in sets for aesthetics and attributes. There are effects in gold and stats on many items that represent set bonuses, but they aren't necessarily attached to matching gear. It allows you to be pretty fluid with your build choices, and a free transmog system in-game lets you alter your appearance at any time by visiting your base. You're never really forced into a specific playstyle regardless of the starting stats you choose. A melee stance system allows you to unlock different styles for each weapon, which has a rock paper scissors effect on enemy combat styles. There's also a stealth option, of course. A perhaps disproportionate amount of optional content in Rise of the Ronin involves clearing outposts of enemies, and there's almost always an option to take out patrolling guards quietly first. This can be done using ranged weaponry or backstabs, and it's always rewarding when it goes well. Quite often you'll find tied up samurai, which are essentially the ghosts of other players who died there. They fight by you as AI and usually reward you on completion of the objective. Multiplayer feeds into the concept of the Blade Twin. After being separated from your initial Blade Twin, you can find and recruit NPCs who can accompany you on missions. Some come from unexpected quarters and are all pretty useful in a fight thanks to decent AI. If you want to, you can summon other players to help you instead, working together until the job is done. You can't play the entire game in co-op, but what's here works well enough. Getting around the world is fun though. You can fast travel to any banners you've unlocked, and there are tons of them, or you can use the grapple, glider or your horse to get around the physical area pretty quickly. Completing more tasks in an area raises your bond with it, just as it does when you spend time with NPCs, so working your way through the checklist is encouraged and honestly pretty enjoyable. Rise of the Ronin is in many ways a fairly safe game. You're free to play it however you like, so it keeps risks to a minimum while rewarding you for exploring and tackling its optional content. What it lacks are wow moments. There's little about it that truly stands out and makes you take note. Even the world, pretty as it is, plays a second fiddle to Ghost of Tsushima's stunning interpretation of Japan. While the combat is slick and fast and not short of spectacle, and the world has plenty to see and do, this is very much an Assassin's Creed style open world with set objectives in each area and little in the way of emergent gameplay, unless you count stealth cock-ups and the resultant explosions of frantic violence. If anything, perhaps Rise of the Ronin is a victim of Team Ninja's recent success. It falls short of the high bar set by Nioh 2 and can't fully compete with Wolong Fallen Dynasty in terms of the combat, but perhaps that's unfair. It balances much of these apparent shortcomings by being more accessible to newcomers and those who seek out this type of world, but don't want to lash themselves to the altar of the Souls-like for 40 hours and counting. Step into this game with realistic expectations and there's a lot of fun to be had, with a decent story, likeable characters and fluid, satisfying combat, but don't expect the sophistication of Nioh 2 or the laser focus of Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Rise of the Ronin is a solid open world action adventure that rarely puts a foot wrong, but it's unlikely to set the world on fire either. For that reason, I'm going to score it an 8 out of 10. Hi there, hope you enjoyed that review of Rise of the Ronin. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, maybe tag the bell icon too so you're kept up to date with everything we post going forward. And if you want to support us via Patreon, you can do that at patreon.com/GodIsAGeek. In the meantime, I've been Mick Fraser and you guys have been lovely. Bye.